Hello, welcome to the Portuguese East Indies Company Conferences series. This time we will talk about the topic on Cabo Delgado, the Jihadism versus oil and gas, with our keynote speaker, Pedro Esteves, and our special commentator, Captain Simon Mann. And first I will introduce Pedro Esteves. Pedro Esteves, are you here? Welcome.
Yes. Hello.
Pedro Esteves, our keynote speaker. Pedro Esteves is a partner at Africa Monitor Intelligence, is an intelligence production and consultancy company on Africa since 2016. He also been involved in competitive intelligence training as well as international businesses development, mostly on Africa and the Arab world. He worked for several years in the Portuguese Intelligence Service as Defense Directorate Bilateral Relations Director and to the Minister of the Interior Political Assistant. He published several academic articles, opinions in the press, and books on intelligence and international politics. He graduated in international relations with a master in political science and post-graduation course on international security at St. Andrews University. And now I'm introducing as well Captain Simon Mann, our special commentator today, one of the founders of Executive Outcomes and now the London ambassador for STTEP International, the private military company most famous for its very successful intervention against Boko Haram in Nigeria in 2018. The famous Captain Simon Mann School at Eton saw action in the Scots Guards and the Special Air Service, SIS, on operations in Northern Ireland and elsewhere. He served a total of 10 years. Having left the army with qualifications in programming and systems analysis and design, he started two IT businesses in combat intelligence and in electronic security. This took him to the Persian Gulf and West Africa. Captain Simon Mann rejoined the British Army for the First Gulf War, joining staff of General Sir Peter de la Billière for a further 2 years, and then what made him internationally worldwide famous was the commander of the force that tried to do the attempt on the coup to Equatorial Guinea. And from these stories, he is now the author as well of the book, famous book, Cry Havoc. So who is interested should really read this book, and for the Portuguese speaking world, it was really made Equatorial Guinea to come to the Portuguese speaking countries community. So Pedro Esteves and Simon Mann, welcome. I'm going to just put a short trailer on a news on Cabo Delgado, just for our viewers to understand what is happening over there.
Turning to the European Union for help to stop attacks by ISIL-linked groups in its northern region. The President wants the EU to train its forces to battle armed groups which emerged 3 years ago in Cabo Delgado. Since then, the fighters have stepped up the violence, seizing important towns and targeting the military.
In
the face of terrorist attacks, the government has responded firmly, on the one hand with the support of local people, through actions to defend sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as through protection of people and their property. On the other hand, the government has mobilized humanitarian assistance for the internally displaced people and promoted socio-economic development activities for the communities.
From Nairobi, Malcolm Webb explains the risk that the fighters pose to this region.
The government of Mozambique has asked for what is described as specialised training and logistics for counter-terrorism forces and also for medical assistance in the combat zone. Mozambique's armed forces have struggled in their fight against the armed groups. Last month, the armed groups took control of the port town of Mocimboa de Praia, and the government forces haven't been able to take the town back since. ISIL has claimed responsibility for some of the attacks that have happened in Cabo Delgado province, although it's not clear how much international support the fighters there actually have. But it is clear that among much of the local population, most of whom are very poor, there are deep grievances which have grown in recent years as they've seen millions of dollars being invested into natural gas facilities along the coast, preparing to extract gas reserves, vast ones worth tens of billions of dollars, discovered there about 10 years ago. The territories that the armed groups now control are inching closer and closer towards those gas facilities, and this is a major concern for the government of Mozambique and for the international oil companies involved.
So, Pedro Esteves, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your invitation, Vittorio, and thanks for also for the presence of Simon here to add information on this webinar. Just to introduce, we at Africa Monitor, we have been following Mozambique since I would say the 80s. And now we have naturally following Cabo Delgado situation very closely, not just because of public interest in general, but because it's a key topic for Mozambique currently and in the next few years. So it's something that we have been following, trying at least to follow very, very closely. Normally we use our own contacts and our own sources, so sometimes the majority assessments on Cabo Delgado are not the ones that we have. And my idea is to somehow express here the way we see it. So basically why this is happening in Cabo Delgado, eventually which solutions can be applied to that situation, to that conflict, and also the role of the gas hub, the natural gas hub that is being developed by key international players from the sector like Total or Exxon or Eni and other smaller multinational companies. So I would start first by trying to explain why this happen in Cabo Delgado. This phenomena is not fully new. It is new because they started to attack in a couple of years ago in 2017. Late 2017, they have decided to start their own jihad, but it was radicalism and proselytism. It is something that was already going on, and apparently no one took care of that risk or of that new phenomena, and they developed to a more, I would say, violent action. And that was what happened. And why this happened, I would start to say that I think that it is important to understand that Cabo Delgado has a vast majority of Muslims. And again, this is everyone say this, but to stress that Muslim is not Jihadism. Muslims are not Jihadists. But in fact, in Cabo Delgado, radicalism has gained ground in the last few years. And because there was already a vast majority of Muslims, so it is easier to grow. We imagined officially the number of Muslims in Cabo Delgado represents 54% of the whole population of the province. And only 3 of the 17 districts that compose Cabo Delgado have a Catholic majority. As we all know, Mozambique has normally a Catholic majority. It's a Catholic country, but it's not the case of Cabo Delgado, and it's not the case of the province of Niassa, which is another one. So this means that it's not odd to see politics and Islam moving all together as a protest movement, and this is also what is going on in Cabo Delgado. Second, because another topic is because radical Islam is present in other neighbor countries in Africa, and it is because Mozambique, it's a weak state in general, meaning that it doesn't control the full part of their own territory. So it is very easy to have illegal immigrants that bring more radical ideas and a more radical way to be Muslims. And that was what happened for years and years. And unofficial reports say that even from Muslim secular leaders mentioned that radical views and ideas on Islam were imported from other countries, and they were all aware on the role of these newcomers and also the role of internet nowadays. As we all know, internet makes a major role on propaganda and also on radicalization. It happened in so many other countries, and it probably also happened in Mozambique. And from indoctrination to jihadism, it's a small step and somehow often a natural evolution, and that was what happened also in Cabo Delgado. Many theories arise in the meantime on what was happening there. I think there were many speculation and maybe not so much, not as much intelligence as it should be. But some people, analysts, commentators, started to see this as an international phenomena, as the Islamic State that wanted to take Mozambique, and others it was still Al Qaeda, and so many different theories, and also the Middle East connections. Others, not the Middle East connections, but the connections to Comores and to Madagascar. There are theories everywhere, and really we have to base our assessment on facts and on data, and we have not seen any, not even in the way that the jihadists act. We haven't seen international financement, sophisticated tactics, new arms coming into Mozambique. So we still consider this situation as mostly a domestic one. It is a domestic problem, maybe a little bit regional, because there are, I would say, radical movements in other countries in the area, namely in Tanzania, for example. But it is still a national problem, and this is the way we have been approaching and following the conflict in Cabo Delgado. Maybe this situation would not have any international concern or echo if we didn't have a project of maybe mostly two consortiums that are developing a big natural gas project in Cabo Delgado, two areas, the Area 1 and the Area 4, and I will mention this a little bit further. And these attract public and international and media attention on what is going on in Cabo Delgado, and this somehow gave more strength to the jihadists and to also the Islamic State propaganda. Islamic State started to show that they were somehow linked with the jihadists in Cabo Delgado. They started to make statements and communiques, and till now, I think this is mostly propaganda, because they didn't even know the name of the villages that were being attacked. So they don't know the ground, they don't know the field, they don't know anything from what we can see on their own statements. I think it is mostly propaganda. This is the way that we are still looking at it. Fourth issue, the weak state that is Mozambique. Mozambique is dependent on international assistance, easily somehow manipulated. There was very recent cases on scandals, namely what became known as the Eden debt scandal. This weak state means that the Mozambicans were not prepared to face such a conflict, not because it's sophisticated conflict, but because it is Mozambique needs to be organized in terms of troops and in terms of security, and even in politically speaking, they have to have a message. They don't have it. So we're still waiting to see what is the real policy from the Mozambican government towards Cabo Delgado. If it is just, an hard solution or if there is other possibilities like there was in other different countries in Africa, namely in North Africa. So in this context, jihadists had all the space to act and to evolve from, I would say, diffuse tactics to a more somewhat chaotic insurgency to a more coordinated action in the field. And this is now being noticed for the last year. They are using very mobile cells composed by a few number of jihadists, of fighters. They don't concentrate. They sometimes they don't even have a single modus operandi. Sometimes they attack villages and they kill everyone and they destroy whatever they can destroy. In other situations, they just try to convince the inhabitants that they are not there to kill them, but they are there to somehow protect them from Frelimus, the state party in Mozambique, oppression. So there is no consistent, not even on the way the several cells act, which turns the situation even more complex. It is also clear the lack of operational leadership and coordination between those groups. Now it seems they are becoming a little bit more organized. They have been attacking some areas in Cabo Delgado, which shows that they already have information on the situation before they attack. So it means that they have some kind of intelligence or at least contacts with inhabitants from those villages. It shows somehow a little bit more professional way of doing things now, because they are having time. They bought time easily from Mozambique, and that allowed them to grow and to take more and to become more influenced in Cabo Delgado than before. So it is assessed now that jihadists may control over 60 kilometers of territory along the coast, including the area between Macomia and Mocimboa da Praia. They are still controlling Mocimboa da Praia, that has turned a sort of capital of Mozambicans jihadists. They took it and they are still controlling it 1 year after they took it, which also somehow shows how effective militaries and security forces are in Mozambique. Finally, they also, so basically we can say that they have managed to stop all the communications in Cabo Delgado. There is no safe roads anymore, and worst, they have almost entered the area where it is called Duat, which means the area where the gas companies are, and the area where they are starting to develop their project onshore, which is near Afungi Bay, so very close to Palma. They almost broke the security there, and they have managed in the last few weeks to isolate completely Palma, which is one of the most important cities, or at least villages in Cabo Delgado, very close to the gas hub. Palma is being supplied by boats and only by trucks that are protected by the military. And even though they are becoming very short of food and other supplies. So this is the situation. It's a little bit a chaotic situation. It seems that they are Mozambicans, Mozambican army is now getting a little bit more control on certain areas. We don't know yet, from our point of view, what is the reason. If it is the reason from the fact that jihadists are reorganizing themselves and leaving some areas to attack others and to concentrate eventually in Palma region, or if they are losing ground to the Mozambicans and to the private military companies that are working along with the Mozambicans. Now the second issue that I want to touch very lightly, which solutions can be expected. I think it's a $1 million question and answer. Hard policy solutions would mean simply military and security solutions, and till now it has been very slow. Mozambique, there was a moment that we were expecting that the regional organization SADC could somehow form an intervention force to support the Mozambican army, but in fact there is no consensus on that. Tanzania is not interested, other countries from the region are not interested. South Africa is pushing a little bit, but there is also some questions on the capability of South Africa to make any difference right now in Mozambique due to lack of eventually equipment and guns and so on and so forth. So, but there was not yet any official request from the Mozambican government to kick off this solution. So situation is still as it was 1 year ago. Another possibility was, in theory, was the exclusive domestic one, meaning that Mozambican could eventually somehow resolve the situation without any help, eventually with the help of some bilateral friends like Russia or like China eventually, because the European Union, I'm excluding the European Union because the European Union will not send any forces to fight in Mozambique. It's not the European Union way of doing things, so they won't do it. So the only situation is to have eventually a bilateral arrangement, even US, who knows. But it didn't happen yet. So it is still in the open. Finally, eventually, any solution that would be more soft, more some political initiative from the Mozambican government or even from any international organization, which I understand it is difficult because we are not dealing with one organization that has one leader, but with, I would say, an organization that has, probably dozens of leaders. Each cell has one single leader, and there is no one to speak with if we want to, or if the Mozambican government wants to somehow make a deal with them. So it is also a situation. It is also a scenario that is highly difficult to have in the next in the short term. On finally a little bit on the gas hub, and which was surely one of the reasons why this movement was born. The movement was born. The Jihadist movement was developed in Mozambique. If there was no gas hub, I think there was no. The situation was not as it is now. It would not have the international attention. It would not have the international propaganda from Islamic State or whatever. And probably it would have disappeared after a couple of months. Gas hub means that if they touch the natural gas investments, then they really compromise the future of Mozambique, because Mozambique depends more than ever on the future developments on the gas in the north. They already were somehow successful on this, because they managed, just to say that there are two main areas, two main consortiums. The area one, which is added by Total, the French Total, who bought Anadarko's share last year. The other one also with Mitsui, the Japanese from Mitsui, and other smaller players. And then the other consortium, which is Area 4, that is composed by Exxon and by Eni and by other players, smaller players also. They are both going to use the same infrastructure onshore in Afungi, because they agreed, both consortiums agreed to use the same infrastructure for gas in the future. So they have different sites offshore, but they will use the same infrastructure in Afungi. That means that if the jihadists manage to touch Afungi infrastructure, they will compromise not just one but both consortiums, and that means that they will probably compromise the whole development of the gas sector in Mozambique. Right now, jihadism is not the only concern for the gas players there, because there is the prices of international gas are not as interesting as they should be. Also, the COVID crisis has also helped to delay some decisions. But the pretext is always the security situation in Mozambique. So even if it is not the single reason why they are delaying investments, it is surely the biggest pretext for them to delay and eventually to renegotiate some of the things that seemed already closed between them and the Mozambican government. So this is the situation now. Total has sent their own CEO a couple of weeks ago to meet President Nyusi after the security breach in Afungi, and to somehow demand for more protection and more security. So they moved all their personnel to safer places like Pemba and Maputo. This means a delay on the investment. The other consortium are waiting for what Total is going to do, because Total is the main operator in the Afungi infrastructure. So everything is dependent on what Total is going to do. Till now, they are keeping their plans, but surely the calendar and the plan has changed after the worsening of the situation in Cabo Delgado. And this is also a victory to jihadists there and to propaganda from jihadists internationally. And it is already proven a very sensitive topic, because the Mozambican government was fully convinced that in maybe 2024 they would have already gas being produced and exported from Mozambique, and of course it means a big amount of taxes to the government. So this is I'm not sure if I already spoke too much or not. I have not listened to you.
Thank you, Pedro Esteves.
Okay.
Did you have anything to add on?
No, just
okay.
To say this is the basic idea I wanted.
Thank you very much for your in-depth insight. I will pass to Captain Simon Mann. Simon, what do you think on this point of views of Pedro Esteves, and what is your experience in the ground, and how do you see this situation in Cabo Delgado?
Well, there's nothing that Pedro said that I would disagree with. First of all, I find the whole thing quite bizarre that a whole country is being held to ransom. I mean, millions of people's welfare is at stake because of a few raggedy-assed bandits, basically. And that the international community, the regional community, is so utterly pathetic that they cannot do something about it. Now, I have very good friends who are on the ground, literally, and they tell me that with 150 of the right people, the right support weapons and equipment, they would be able to sort this whole thing out in 2 months. Now, I think most of the audience here on this conference know very well that a key military principle, if one is in the position of being a general, is to reinforce success. And I only hope that IS and Al-Qaeda and the rest of them, whatever they call themselves this week, do not reinforce success. Because in Cabo Delgado, it is a success, even though it's a bunch of raggedy-assed hooligans, basically. These people are not hardcore jihadists. They are not the real thing. They're like Boko Haram. This is amateur night, and there is absolutely no reason why they cannot be defeated in short order. Now, I'd like to stress, having said that when I talk about defeating them in short order, that is a military solution. Soldiers are very good at dealing with military solutions. They're no good at all at dealing with political ones. And this situation really stems from total neglect by Maputo of a region of their own country. And so Pedro is right. You know, the oil comes, the gas comes, the money comes, and ooh, now this is a good idea. Now we can really cause some trouble. And I've heard some very amusing stories, actually, about the origins of the Cabo Delgado insurgency, one of which is that it all stemmed around a bunch of Pakistani ruby smugglers. Another is that one of the problems is returning mujahideen who were recruited in the 70s by the CIA to go and fight in Afghanistan, because, well, they're Muslims after all, so off they went, and they've now come back home and said, oh, well, we could have a bit of an insurgency here. Now, I mean, these stories are quite funny, and probably there's some truth in all of them. But what is really, really serious here is that they are actually winning. And as I understand it, the bad guys in that region probably have an income of around 12 million euros per annum. Now, this is derived, as I understand it, from probably the ruby smuggling, but also that part of the world is a well-known drug smuggling crossroads, with heroin going westwards and cocaine going eastwards. And that is where their money's coming from. Now, I can tell you something, that if the guys that I know or myself had half of that budget, we would defeat these people. But then the political solution has to follow the soldiers. And the political solution is that the people of Cabo Delgado have to feel that they're part of a country and not some kind of neglected outpost, which is, as I understand it, how they do feel. And then there is a further complication, then I'll shut up, which is that I think there is a serious tribal issue on the ground and a real threat of a genocide, a tribal genocide, because there are tribal issues there which I believe could flare up in such a way that one side or the other takes the opportunity of getting rid of a rival tribe. And obviously that would be a catastrophe that we would all wish to do almost anything to avoid. So I'll go back to where I started, which is I'm left in amazement that no one can get a grip of this. Suggestions on a postcard. Actually, not as suggestions on a postcard, just send a check. I've lost your sound.
Thank you very much, Pedro, and thank you, Simon, for telling on the sound. And Pedro, there are a lot of Portuguese people asking why the Portuguese armed forces are not supporting in this combat to these terrorist attacks. But of course, everything goes back to political issues. If politically Mozambique wants foreign support on this. But first of all, the private military companies are the first and on the ground already. What is this? How can you see this kind of conflict or situations or tension, at least?
In the case of Portugal, just like in other different cases, for example, the US, we have for years and years and years cooperation, military cooperation with the Mozambican army, which is basically training, and this is the way things will continue to be. Yeah, it is training, and it is very difficult to, in a European democracy, to send troops to add someone in a conflict which is not even an international conflict; it's an internal conflict. How could we justify politically that decision? That to go to Parliament, and in Parliament probably it wouldn't pass. So this is the way things are. It is also this is not just because Mozambican government, it's not a victim on this. Sometimes there's an idea that they are victims of everything because the world is unfair, and no, they never make any specific and open and official request to any country, as far as we know, and not even to South Africa, which is their neighbors. And maybe there are some rivalries, but it's their neighbors, and they never did anything like that. In SADC, some members asked, and we reported that in Africa Monitor. There was a meeting, and the only things the Mozambican asked to their partners in ACDC was, give us money and guns. No, and so they say, this is all that you have to tell us. Don't you think that we need more information, more intel to understand? They don't send any intel. Maybe they don't have it, because the intelligence service in Mozambique is apparently disappeared somewhere, because it seems it is only concerned with Renamo, the opposition, and not with Cabo Delgado situation, which is, everything is very strange and everything needs many answers, if there are answers to this. So their apparent choice was to try to, with some very very informal help from. There are reports that there are some Zimbabweans there, people that were sent by the Zimbabwean president eventually, but mostly the option was to take care of the problem themselves with the help of PMCs, of private military companies. And so they have, first it was Wagner, the Russian PMC, which things were not very well for Wagner. There was reports on lack of coordination. They didn't trust the Mozambican army. There was no information from the ground. They were, for several times, surprised by people that were dressed like militaries, and they were not militaries. They were jihadists because they had stolen their, or bought, I don't know, their own clothes to the military, and that it happened really, and there was ambushes because of that. So they decided to withdraw. And now we have the DIC advisory group there helping the Mozambicans. Not sure, maybe Simon has a better view on their own performance. Apparently, there is also logistical problems. They take too much time on refuel. They have to go to Pemba from Cabo Delgado, interior part of Cabo Delgado, to Pemba, and then they have to come back. And it takes time, and operational it has a difficult. It is difficult to manage. So we are all trying to understand. Even for a bad choice, there must be a reason. And so all the bad choices that are being made in Mozambique, in several different topics concerning Cabo Delgado, must have an explanation. And somehow we are all here trying to understand which is the explanation.
So I'm going to open the floor to some questions from the viewers. Jorge Silva says that U.S. State Department has designated Al-Sunna from Mozambique as well as its siblings from DRC as SDGTs, specially designated global terrorist organizations. And a question for you both from Cesar Rodriguez is, there is a chance of defeating the insurgency in the long term without addressing the social, economic, and political grievances in Cabo Delgado?
Can I answer?
Please.
Because I think I already said that. You know, soldiers are very good at solving military problems, but that does not solve the social problem. And that has to be done in coordination. And the way in which that's done is very well set out, laid out, written about, and everything else in all sorts of campaigns, successful and otherwise. So no one is suggesting you can just go in, kill a few people, and then the problem's gone away. I stressed earlier that this is a very long-standing social issue, one of neglect from the central government, and also a tribal one, and also a political one going back to the Civil War. So it's extremely complicated, and the military problem is only one part of the overall problem. But if you don't solve that, you can't get at the other things. And SADC's track record of solving anything is, I don't know, just about zero, I think. So I wouldn't look in that direction.
Pedro?
Well, the inclusion of also Mozambique terrorist movement by the State Department, it's not new because they were already, giving more attention to that fact. But I don't think that changes anything. I mean, it's what does it change? It changes anything. It's politics. It's nothing more than that. Honestly, I don't see any link. Maybe I really don't have satellites here in Africa Monitor, not yet, but to intercept communications. But in fact, I haven't seen, even if you look at them, as Simon was saying, even if we look at the images and the way they operate, where is the professional? Where is terrorism in the way that we need, to understand that they are somehow organized, that they have tactics, that they have, and we haven't seen anything of that in Mozambique. So if it is the Islamic State or Al Qaeda, it is surely, I would say, a low cost Al Qaeda and a low cost Islamic State. On which was the other issue you mentioned?
Is there a chance of defeating the insurgency in the long term without addressing the social, economic, and political grievances in Cabo Delgado?
I had some data, interesting data. I'm not sure if I have it here, but there was a study on how the youth and businessmen were from the different provinces of Mozambique were seeing their own future, and in fact, the answers in Cabo Delgado were very much critical in the way that they just don't trust Maputo, they just don't trust Frelimo, and they just don't trust Maconde the tribal group, because Maconde now is also linked with the President Nyusi, which is a Maconde, and also all the Maconde people that control Cabo Delgado. So there is it is of course essential to have more economic development, but not just an investment, and they have created an agency to do that. It is still in the paper apparently, with a plan of huge financements, which no one knows where Mozambique is going to get it, but it was announced, and it is surely one answer to Cabo Delgado, just like it is one answer to the whole country, because Cabo Delgado is not the only province that needs more investment and more jobs and more future for young people. So it is of course one of the answers, but it is not truly a short answer because it is impossible.
Oh, thank you, Pedro. And I have here from the Portuguese Army Infantry, Lieutenant Colonel Luís Bernardino, who is serving in NATO. Luís Bernardino, Lieutenant Colonel, is fully agreed with Simon. It's a problem of bandits. The problem is the political solution. The question is, what will change in the future in Cabo Delgado after today's US declaration about the ISIS-affiliated leaders? And the second question from the Lieutenant Colonel is, I fully agree with Simon again. It's a problem of bandits. The problem is the political solution. Question is, what can do Portugal in this context? So, two questions. What will change in the future in Cabo Delgado after today's US declaration about the ISIS-affiliated leaders? And what can do Portugal in this context? So each question for each of you.
Simon,
please.
Okay, I agree with Pedro again, totally. The American declaration will make absolutely no difference whatsoever. And what can Portugal do? This is a slightly longer answer, but the PMC track record in Mozambique is absolutely appalling. And I'm sorry to say that I actually know quite a lot of them myself very well. And you haven't even mentioned yet the likes of DSL, Aegis, Eric Prince, and others going back a long way. And none of these outfits have actually done what they should have done. And you may be surprised, since some people regard me as a sort of a godfather to the PMC, the modern PMC, when I say that I think the PMC model is completely done. It's over, it's finished. Because no country in this present world now can afford to hire mercenaries. You just can't do it. And I don't think it's a great idea in the first place, because you're basically already admitting that your own armed forces are no good. So what's wrong with you? Why do you have to go and spend money on a bunch of foreigners instead of sorting out your own army? And the question, going back to the Colonel, is what can Portugal do? What Portugal should do is man and finance a real training team. And I think that the model I really like is that of Oman, the war in the 70s in Oman, whereby there are outsiders, but they're not mercenaries. They're signed up into the armed forces of Mozambique. And they don't just train, they form a special unit with special pay, special equipment, 1 to 6, one outsider to every 6 locals, roughly is a good rule of thumb. And they don't just train them and equip them, they lead them. So that when that unit goes into action, they are there. They're with them and they fight. And that, I really believe, would solve the problem from a military point of view very efficiently and well. And I wrote a piece that was in the Times in London a couple of months ago, but amazingly enough, no one's taken my advice yet.
Simon, I remember that you enlisted as well in the ranks, among the ranks of the Angolan army.
I was a general, actually, yes, in the Angolan army. It was pretty good, considering I didn't speak a word of Portuguese. But anyway, I was one.
So, in Pedro? So on the Portugal, I think it's what I already have said. It's we can somehow help Mozambique to get some support in the European Union, but in fact our influence in the European Union, even now we have the presidency, and we are, as you may know, our foreign minister went to Mozambique recently, not just as a condition of foreign minister, but also as within the European Union presidency. So we can try to have more attention from the European Union to Mozambique, but as I said, the European Union is very much resistant on not just sending troops, because it will not happen, but also on giving money to the Mozambican, directly to the government, to the Mozambican government, because the background from the Mozambican government on the way they manage money, it's not properly very transparent. So what can Portugal do? It's basically, influence, lobby for Mozambique, but also very limited, because it's not our money, it's money of our European Union parties also. On the American list, I agree with Simon. It's a political, eventually it may, if the US wants to, is doing this to have a more open cooperation, military cooperation with Mozambique, it may happen. I mean, they follow a certain way, and this is one of the last chapters, is to include what the Mozambican groups, the Cabo Delgado groups, as terrorists and so on and so forth. But if this is needed to have more cooperation from the US in Mozambique, well, eventually it may be a step on that sense. We must not forget that we don't have many US companies, but Exxon is there in the gas sector, and it was Anadark before, it was bought by Total, but now Exxon is still there, and it is the main player of the second consortium, the Area 4 consortium.
I have a question here from Cesar Rodrigues. The Portuguese government, which is currently heading the presidency of the European Union Council, has stated its intention of making Cabo Delgado a EU priority. Is this a realistic prospect? In the ways can the EU contribute to address the insurgency, international mobilization, funding and peace building programs, military training support? Or are just political statements?
I said earlier that the people on the ground, who I know and trust very, very well, have told me that 150 people with the right equipment could sort the military problem out. Okay, so if the entire EU can't produce $10 million and 150 people of the right sort, then we're all in a lot of trouble.
Pedro.
Yeah, just to add what I have said on this, I think one of the biggest problems is reputation. And the government, the Mozambican government, has a terrible reputation. And no one wants to give money to the Mozambican government unless there is control on that money and unless there are results from that money that comes into Mozambique. The European Union is already one of the biggest sponsors of Mozambique in terms of humanitarian aid, even budget, even to the Mozambican budget. So I think that one of the consequences from that scandal some years ago, the hidden debt scandal, was not just on the IMF, which suspended all the programs on Mozambique, or even other finances from that were supporting Mozambique, is that now things are even worse for the Mozambican government. The European Union has been saying that it is ready to support Mozambique, but it is not ready to give money just like that, and surely not ready and will not send troops directly, because the European Union has no troops has no European Union troops. It is the member states that will decide eventually to send troops, which will surely not happen in Mozambique. So basically, this is the situation. Mozambique, they have been creating new agencies for development, for the Cabo Delgado development, but again, these agencies are now under the control of one minister, which also has not a very, I would say, positive reputation, and people know that. He has some background on less. He was one of the right arms of President Guebuza. Now he is with Nussi, and the problem is that we are giving money to an agency that is dependent on someone that has not which is not yet proven a good manager, as a good manager and a transparent minister, which is surely the case. So this is one of the Mozambicans' problem, and it affects Cabo Delgado, of course.
Last week we had a conference with Lieutenant Colonel Luis Bernardino on the CPLP defense cooperation and the presence of the Chinese military in Africa. So is in this situation, is there any room for any kind of Chinese cooperation or intervention, either for Chinese PMCs or PLA? Because he is an actor that normally we don't talk about, but it is interesting. And even Japan is one of the most important donors and country that cooperates with Mozambique from the Far East.
But Vittorio, surely it's not that difficult to set up a fund of money which is in Maputo, but which is not under the control of the government. And that with that money, some sensible people are allowed to build up a strike force within the Mozambique armed forces, a strike brigade, 5,000 men, and equip them and train them properly, and then take them into that battle and sort out the military problem. That is not difficult. Japan could do it, China could do it, the EU could do it, anybody could do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Pedro?
On what was the last part of the
No, I'm talking about if China could take any stake on this or not, or simply not.
Yeah. Well, China has a military base already in Africa, right? So it may
in Djibouti.
Yes. So in theory, yes, but I don't think they will do it. I think that we have to look at this in the short-term way, because if we look at the problem in a long-term way, the problem will disappear because the gas hub will disappear. They will give up Mozambique. Maybe they can change to Tanzania or to other countries. Another interesting theory is that, which is also a conspiracy theory, just like many, is that Tanzania is somehow interested on what is going on in Cabo Delgado because it gives them more importance than Mozambique, and they have also interesting reserves of natural gas. So, but I think that the only outsider that may help Mozambique, not because of Mozambique, not because of the weather in Maputo, but because Total is there. And I think it's the French, and the French are neighbors. They are 500 kilometers away in Mayotte, and they're already thinking of moving some of the services that should be in Mozambique to Mayotte because of the situation. And Mozambique has to wake up, because if they don't wake up, maybe they will transfer almost everything onshore to Mayotte. And there are plenty of Mayotte businessmen that are very interested on that. We must not forget that Mayotte is European territory, which is also very attractive to investors. What is the Mozambican government waiting for? No one knows. Situation is getting worse unless the security situation improves significantly. This is the only way, I think, in my view, not to see Total move some of the key services, including some infrastructures and service providers, to Mayotte. And Mozambique will be just a place where they are going to drill, and not much more than that.
And then on these jihadist movements, is there anything to do with Qatar as well, or is different stories?
That's another theory, right?
One of the many.
So many. I have no information on that, really.
Very well.
But Vittorio, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. This is ragtag and bobtail. They could call themselves Al-Shabaab or IS or Al-Qaeda or whatever neon sign they want to put up this week, but they're not the real thing. But they could be. They could be if they carry on winning, and then you've got a real problem for the region.
Exactly. That's the point, to destabilize the whole region, because further in north is not healthy already.
So many problems potentially if IS or Al-Qaeda or whatever you want to call them, whoever they are this week, build up a real center up there, and not just for Mozambique.
Yeah.
So probably this is a problem that will not be solved soon, this year or next.
Don't know. Depends.
Yeah. It is anyway. It is already affecting the south part of Tanzania, because they are already having attacks there, and the Tanzanian army already attacked some of the jihadist positions in Mozambique from their side of the border. So for the jihadists and for the people there in general, the border doesn't exist. This is all the same country, and it's Africa and it's Eastern Africa, and so it is very easy that the conflict may spread more seriously to other countries. And this is also why I am somehow surprised by the fact that ACDC has not yet managed to do anything concrete. They are still discussing and waiting for something to happen. Mozambique, it's not particularly, apparently at least, very interested on having regional force helping them there. So it's a mystery.
Yes, and Jorge Silva just commented that recommends the reading of Mozambique, the El Dorado, Gazier or Caos, about the French role in the problem from Environmental Justice Organization. So yes, the situation of Mayotte is very clear as well. And so in this sense, I think it is worth for the government to think on the situation on creating an international strike force inside the ranks in the way that can tackle directly the problem. Do you agree, Pedro? Is it feasible nowadays to approve such idea from the Mozambican government ranks?
I'm not a military, so I'm not sure how long will it take to do it. But since they already lost more than 3 years on this, I don't know if they are still ready to wait more 3 or 4 or 5. I don't know. Well, maybe till the gas companies decide to leave.
In Angola, it was done by executive outcomes in 2 months. We formed a brigade, a special brigade, out of the Angolan army in 2 months.
Was it in Cabinda?
No. This was the main base was Cabo Delgado, 70 kilometers south of Luanda, and that was the training base. But then the brigade positioned itself in Sarimo, and it was armored infantry and was extremely effective. It can be done, and it can be done quickly. And the people, the outsiders, I call them the outsiders, who would join the Mozambique army and help form and train this brigade, there are many of them around, and very, very good ones. That is not difficult. And it's not illegal. They will be enlisted in the Mozambique armed forces, and the money to pay them and the management and everything has to be done through a separate structure from the normal one in Maputo. It can be done.
Exactly, it's an approach that normally we don't use to discuss publicly, or we...
Well, the most effective, I look at 4 campaigns. STEP in Nigeria in 2018. Executive outcomes in Angola and Sierra Leone in 93-45. And then I look at Oman, the Oman War in the 70s. And all 4 of those campaigns were extremely effective. And they all used outsiders. But the difference is that Oman embedded the outsiders into their own armed forces. And that meant there was no mercenaries, there was none of that going on. There wasn't huge sums of money being made and Amnesty International crying that the mercenaries are killing everybody. There was none of that, and the job was done. And it was done politically and socially. It wasn't just simply a matter of soldiering. It was done properly with the full spectrum. The campaign included the full spectrum. And that is how it has to be done.
Thank you, Simon. I have the last question here from Jose. Once the north of Mozambique is free from jihadists, to which country or region is expected they will move to?
Oh my God, I don't know. Well, they're going to go anywhere, aren't they? I mean, they're already quite strong in parts of Tanzania, Al-Shabaab. Yeah.
In Pedro?
Yes. No answer on that. No idea. I just want to say this because sometimes it may look that we are approaching this topic as just business as usual or just a political theory issue. But we must not forget that this incompetence from the government in Mozambique has already provoked more than 500,000 refugees that live in subhuman conditions in Pemba and elsewhere, and that we have eventually more than 5,000 deaths, civilian deaths in Mozambique, died in the worst way you can imagine. So because we have been looking into pictures and films and things. So and this is the responsibility of the government that was elected, at least apparently, by the Mozambicans, and it is doing nothing efficient and nothing serious to finally put an end on this. On the way they can choose, they have all the right to, if they want to have PMCs training them, just do it. If they prefer to have a regional force, just do it. if they prefer to have a bilateral agreement with China, or if Chinese agree, or with French or whoever. They have to do something, and they are not doing anything.
So is it something like the Portuguese way of thinking? What is not solved is?
Eventually.
Okay, thank you very much, Pedro Esteves, for your in-depth explanations, and as well from the insights of Captain Simon Mann. Simon, would you like to explain very briefly about your book, Cry Havoc?
Oh, well, it's my autobiography. I wrote it it was published in 2011, and it's on Amazon. And it's, well, what can I say? It's a story of my life, but unfortunately slightly messed up by the lawyers, because there were some libel issues.
But actually, it is very interesting to understand the adventurous life of action in Africa, not only in Africa but also in Comoros. Yes.
Well, what I write, if when a younger person gives me the book, they want me to sign it, I write at the front, "Do not try any of this at home."
Oh, I have a complaint here from Eugenio Costa Almeida that addressed a question, and I didn't pose. Sorry for interrupting you, but I'm going to pose his question. The problem of Cabo Delgado, in addition to the issues related to the lack of employment for the local population, in particular young people in the face of mining and hydrocarbon exploitation, is also not at issue. The problems that already existed during the independence struggle. Historic and official persecution of Mwanis by the Macons, including killings without appeal or aggravation in re-education camps in the interior of the province. And what part of this advance of terrorism again? Yeah, this is the address of Eugenio Costa Almeida. Pedro, would you like to address on this comment from his?
I think that Eugenio is right on raising the issue, the ethnic issue between Maconde and the original tribes of Cabo Delgado, because in fact Maconde were somehow immigrants that decided to take over the economy of Cabo Delgado, and now because the Maconde clan is also in the government and in the presidency, it gives more political significance on the rivalry between Maconde and the other tribes in Cabo Delgado. But again, these rivalries don't explain what is going on in Cabo Delgado. They don't explain why there is a jihadist-based insurgency, revolt. Why now? And I think it has more to do with with the topics that we have raised here, and not so much on the ethnic rivalry between Maconde and the original tribes, I think.
And then here, one last question for Simon. Even if the coin approach is properly conducted, how to deal with the issue of transnationality? That is the fact that the insurgents have bases in Tanzania and across the borders more or less freely.
I mean, this is a common problem in counterinsurgency warfare, where you have an insecure border, and traditionally it's always caused trouble. But normally the best way to do it is to have a kind of a hot pursuit deal with the neighbors. and also beef them up so that they're doing the same thing you are on the other side. And those things can be done.
Pedro, is it anything that the Portuguese did before during the war in Africa?
Well, sorry?
Is that related to this question? Is it anything that the Portuguese did already before during the war in Africa when had to insert troops over the border to tackle the enemy?
Yeah. Mozambique has a bilateral agreement with Tanzania on border security and border control, and they met several times on that agreement that was signed maybe 3-4 years ago. Apparently, the idea was also to have Mozambicans in Tanzania and to have Tanzanians in Mozambique in common operations. It seems it's not working. It's not working again. So we all know that politically the relations between the Tanzanian president and the Mozambican one are not good ones. Traditional, the relations are not that close. But maybe in some situations of urgency, both countries should do more than what what is being done. It has been very common to have attacks in the area of the Rovuma, the river, so the border. Very common, jihadists that come from Tanzania to attack in the Mozambican side and vice versa. Now vice versa also. So it is I think it would be interesting and essential for both countries to agree on this, on having more border security and common and joint operations in this area. Yes.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Simon, do you have any last remark?
No.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time today. We are very honored to have you both in this conference, and then we'll help a lot of people to understand a bit of this problem and to address in a realistic way. So we will come back for another sessions and another topics that we will soon announce. So thank you very much, Pedro Esteves and Simon Mann. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.